The 2024-25 NHL season didn't exactly bring the best out of the Pittsburgh franchise. But there was a really good power play, which is a very comfortable place historically for this franchise. Good morning to you. Good Friday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Penguins. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into football and or baseball, I also offer daily shots of Steelers and Pirates that I hope you'll also check out. 25.8% was the conversion rate of the power play this past season. That was sixth best in the NHL. And while that isn't always a sign that you've got a good hockey team, for example, other teams in the NHL's top 10 were the Blackhawks at 7, Utah at 10, but most of the rest were pretty reflective of their relative positions in the standings. The Jets had the number one power play, Winnipeg at 28.9, Golden Knights at 28.3, Devils at 28.2, Red Wings, Lightning, Avalanche, Maple Leafs rounding out the rest of the top 10. It's not bad company to be keeping, even if it is with an isolated statistic. Penguins also ranked 7th in total power play goals, which is a nice number because it shows you're also working to get your chances. They were 17th in power play opportunities at 221. They had guys who can draw power plays. They had guys who can work power plays. And most important, they had guys who could finish power plays. And not to be forgotten, the previous season was just a disaster for comparison purposes. So, what changes? Well, let's first go to what changed between the previous season and this past season. The most notable was the replacing of Todd Reirden as the power play coach with David Quinn. Quinn is now gone, of course, having followed Mike Sullivan to New York and the Rangers. Also gone from last season, and apparently forgotten as well, is Matt Grzelcyk, who the coaching staff, meaning, of course, Sullivan and Quinn, liked so much on the power play that he took the place of either Erik Karlsson or Chris Letang, or both, depending on your perspective, on the first unit. And to his credit, did pretty well. Really nice distributor of the puck, was able to make some things happen by passing down low, and he's not here either. That said, most of these guys are obviously going to be back. Most of the main guys, the most important guys. That'll start with Todd Nelson. He's one of Dan Muse's new assistant coaches. He arrives with a long and rich pedigree of building successful power plays, principally at the AHL level. This was Nelson a handful of weeks ago at development camp talking about his mindset in building a power play.
You don't have to overthink the power play. I think the biggest thing is just working together, getting pucks to the net, attacking the net. Make sure that you lose when you shoot the puck. You have to retrieve those loose puck battles. Come with speed off the breakout, and just everybody working together. And that's the biggest thing, is trying to find the personnel that works well with each other, because you're dealing with high-end skill. You're dealing with guys that, they're all very proud hockey players, and sometimes it might look good on paper, but it doesn't really mesh well on the ice. So that's something that we'll talk about as a group and figure it out moving forward.
Okay, so not exactly a ton of clues in that. But Nelson and others in the organization have acknowledged the obvious this summer, which is that things went pretty well this past season, so why would you mess with too much of that? So from there, I guess, it's kind of up to us, at least for the time being, to figure out who would be on these two power play units. I'm going to start with the insultingly obvious that the entire Sidney Crosby line, including Brian Rust and Rickard Rakell, even if they aren't together at 5-on-5 for some reason, would be out there on the top unit. All three of them, of course, up front. Now, I say that, and the next thing I'm going to say is not going to match up with that at all. But, it's summertime. I want Ville Koivunen on this unit. I saw him do things from a vision/distribution standpoint that I haven't seen from anybody below the 87/71 bar in some time. Kid can really see the ice. He can really draw people to him. He can really drift in off the wall and make things happen from already dangerous spaces. To get a little more specific here so you can hopefully picture it, he can come into either face-off dot, left or right, off the wall, and still function as more of a passer than a shooter, but it's not passing just for the sake of passing. He's looking for the kill shot pass. He's looking for the primary assist. I want him on the top power play unit. Now, I say that, and I realize I've got 3 guys up front already, and I'm not about to go into a season with 4 forwards and Erik Karlsson because I'm just begging to give up shorthanded goals. So it's at this point that I will punt on that part of it and proceed to that point man. If Karlsson is still here, he's the obvious choice. He's one of the better offensive defensemen in hockey history. And if it isn't him, if he does end up getting traded, then it's just as obviously going to be Chris Letang. You'll notice, conspicuously, I'm leaving Evgeny Malkin off of this, and that's in large part because I saw a comfort level from him in coming on with the second unit this past season that I had not expected to see. And I also saw efficiency and productivity from him. He wasn't, going over the boards and pouting. He was going out there and just immediately taking advantage of what in some cases were tired penalty killers. So if you're looking at the rest of this and you still have the development thing in mind, you want Rutger McGroarty out there. I think you want Anthony Mantha out there. Phil Tomasino is a possibility, Tommy Novak. But another thing that comes into this conversation, and I don't think anybody would argue this, is that if you don't have Karlsson or Letang out there with one or the other unit, you really don't have a whole lot of other choices when it comes to the defenseman. So you're probably going to see 4 forwards and a defenseman, even if it makes you all cringy, at least with the first unit. And Gino, of course, can be a guy that's got a ton of experience as a forward at the point with the second unit. But overall, you can see that the picture that I'm painting is pretty murky. There's a lot of work to do. There's going to be a lot of playing things out in training camp to see how that shapes out. When we come back, J1Q. Today's J1Q comes from ZJ, who says, DK, do you think Rutger McGroarty, Ville Koivunen, or any other prospect will be a finalist for the Calder Trophy this coming season? It feels hard to be as excited about these guys with what a lot of their peers are doing around the league. I think that if they're in the running, that would change sentiment about them pretty quickly. I'm not sure which sentiment you're picking up on, ZJ, or if you're just describing your own there. I've sensed a lot of excitement about both McGroarty and Koivunen, as well as a couple other guys, notably Harrison Brunick. If you want them to be comparable to, a Connor Bedard in Chicago, a Macklin Celebrini in San Jose, or Matvei Michkov in Philadelphia, if you're looking for that wow factor, that, man, we've got ourselves the next star, then respectfully, and this is nothing other than my looking at your question from afar, without knowing you, without knowing, the insides of how you feel about hockey and so forth, it just sounds a lot like what everybody else is saying related to this lottery concept, where the Penguins, if they don't win the lottery, they're just doomed. If they don't get Gavin McKenna, they're going to be resigned to 10, 20 years of mediocrity or mushy middle. And I get that. That's our history here in Pittsburgh. We would see somebody come along. We would have zero doubts about that particular prospect. And we would just sit back, open up the nachos, and enjoy the next 10, 15, 20 years. Well, the fact is, the Penguins lived that life that's virtually impossible to achieve, judging by all the rest of the teams, not just once, but twice. And it's not going to happen here a third time. There's nothing about this scenario that's going to segue into something like that. So if you choose, and you can, it's up to you, to be super into an individual or one guy who can make you believe in the whole process, one kid who can come along and do that, you're probably going to be disappointed here for a while. I'll take Koivunen as an example here. I saw Koivunen do stuff that I haven't seen a young player wearing that sweater do in a long time. No less an authority than Yevgeny Malkin, who is not prone to saying things just to toe the company line, was glowing about him. I'm talking about on the record, off the record, whatever. He was all over Koivunen and the things that he was seeing from him. He called him great. Said he's going to be great. It's also my experience that players see this stuff better than anybody, including professional scouts or analytics gurus, anybody. Players see it. Well, to my count now, the current players have seen something at this level from Koivunen. They've seen it at a different juncture from Harrison Brunick. They've seen it in a different juncture and in a different way from Sergei Murashov. Now, I'll ask you, ZJ, do you value more the excitement of having a Penguins prospect being in the Calder race, or the Penguins having three guys like this, and McGroarty, and the other recent first-rounders that they've gotten? That's why I keep emphasizing here quantity along with quality, not in place of quality, but along with. It's not going to be something that, you show up in Cranberry and you find your space in those bleachers and you sit down and you get pulled out of it. Oh, you're just screaming. You're freaking out. This kid is so spectacular, and I was here for his first ever goal. You're not going to get that. I'm sorry. You're not going to get that right now. And I don't know that you'll get it next year or the year after. But you know what I would take? I would take seeing a line or two or a defense pairing or a young goaltender cannibalizing up, a third of my roster. Again, not immediately, but in the near future, and legitimately contributing to that team having some success, as opposed to just having a certain portion of the roster be young just so they're young. And I'm going to guess here, without speaking for anybody else either, that there's a lot of people in this fan base who'd love to see it play out like that. I appreciate that question. It's a good one. It's one of the best we've actually gotten in a while, to be honest with you, at the risk of offending everybody else. I appreciate everybody who listens to Daily Shot of Penguins, including when we disagree, as a few of us appear to have done over the past few days. That's fine. We're just talking hockey here, and we'll be back with more of that on Monday.